All right,
Do we have a forum?
Yes.
yes, we do. We have four of us, so we can go ahead and get started. It's
Alrighty.
1 minute past 7.
Alrighty.
All right, so call to order. Revisions to agenda. I suppose if Alice isn't attending today, we probably won't have a CVRPC update. We can remove item 6. I didn't have anything else. I don't know if there's any other edits. No. Okay. Moving on, public forum. There is no one but us here, so we'll move right through that. And we now have approval of minutes, September 2. I did not have any comments, but
And I didn't either.
Oh,
all right.
must be excellent minutes, Carol. Tip of the hat.
Yeah.
I move to approve the minutes.
I
right.
second.
Thanks, Beth. All in favor, say aye. Raise hands.
Aye.
All right, that was unanimous. So
Slow down.
minutes are approved. All right, so that gets us to item number 5, Village Master Plan update. I note that in our packet today, we have some movement from wetlands. So Emery, if you want to.
But,
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not a lot.
You wanna go through the letter and I'll explain maybe the CDBG grant?
yes, well, my first question is, JB, have we heard anything since the packet was put together?
No,
Okay,
but I did follow up with Shannon at the behest of York and Josh and let her know about the CDBG grant that we're pursuing for the Carroll Roads, to kind of just show her that, hey, we're already working
nice.
towards it, so yeah. But
nice. Well, basically, we did receive a very brief response from Shannon that stated, thank you for your letter, we're working on it. But I thought it was interesting that she did point out that she said that there is no moratorium on wetland permits. I could have sworn she said there was a moratorium on that October of 23, right?
and she was also, according to Sean, that was what he was told as well, so. Now maybe
Okay,
it wasn't
so
a,
I thought that was a noted point, okay? She says there's no more moratorium, and she stated that the reason she was an advocate for the master plan was because she knew to the level that we wanted to build, it would be better to have a overall gestalt understanding of what we're looking at, which is totally understandable. But what we were getting at was, okay, we're giving you what you want. Now what? And so her brief response was, I'm going to pass this up to my higher authority and get back to you.
Yeah,
So,
that's how I read it as well.
so that's it. And then my other question was, have we heard anything from Mark?
no, Mike.
Mike. So.
No, but that's good to follow up with. I know Tucker was, I think he was on maternity leave, but I'll try to
Okay.
follow up with,
So Mike, for everyone's reminder, he's with the Army Corps of Engineers. And apparently a very nice guy, and he said that he was going to get back to us on accumulated acreage of wetland impacts. And that would be huge because we have a certain percentage that we have to go by. And they incorporate damage already done in that whole, so everything that we want to do, they're going to put on it everything that we did in the past.
It doesn't,
Sound good?
yeah, it doesn't sound good for Irisville. Okay.
No,
Should
so.
have information at least.
Yeah.
But, so that's the information that, we're waiting on. And then, Steering committee meeting for September was canceled. But we will be meeting as a core team next week. And the next steering committee meeting will be the meeting in October,
To be determined date.
to be determined date. So that's my report.
Thank
I
you.
think, I think that's all there is,
No,
right?
yeah, and just to dovetail on that, so we're York, followed by myself and Josh, once he heads out of town. We'll be submitting a CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, for disaster recovery. The object, we're trying to use this for wastewater funding. We could not tie it to the July 2023 flooding. So we pivoted and started thinking about wetland work and opportunities to enhance master planning efforts.
Wow.
So we will be pursuing an application due on the 30th, and it's gonna be seeking to replace a I wouldn't say failing, but certainly aging, and I had seen some pictures of it, and it's not in great shape. Culvert under Carroll Road that goes from across the Roberts property towards the town stormwater pond. So that'll be one. We're looking at a potential box culvert. Recent conversation with stream alteration specialist Rachel Czar. She thought that perhaps a bridge might be more might fit better, and actually will depend on the cost of that versus a box culvert.
Would be better for wildlife,
I mean,
a bridge.
bridge, yeah, sure, yeah. And the acquisition of the undeveloped parcel at the corner of Carroll and Main Street. That's currently I think assessed at $90,000 in the town, by the
Oh.
town. And then taking a look at the town pond and to evaluate its current functions and possible restoration or redesign. All to enhance the flood resiliency of that area of town and Lower Bridge Street. So, and again, I sent an email to Shannon, letting her know this. I have not heard back. I think that was last Friday. But I wanted to show that we're pushing forward in good faith with trying to improve the flood resiliency in that area, no matter what.
Yeah,
So,
excellent.
yeah, so we'll be getting that grant in by the 30th, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what Shannon's feedback is.
So the corner lot that is under consideration for acquisition, is that if you were coming off Route 100 onto Carroll, or is it the left-hand lot?
So
Or
so yes, it'd be if you were coming from here and you took a right, it'd be right there on the left.
Okay.
It was kind of deforested.
I was gonna say,
in January
logging
last year,
down-
yeah.
Yeah,
And there were some violations put on that property. They had to do a wetlands delineation, which I don't, as I mentioned last time, is still not up. I don't think it's been incorporated into the state website yet, but.
okay,
So there's a recent wetlands delineation there, and I think they were asked to repair it as best they could. But
okay,
I've not gotten a lot of information from Shannon on that, and I do know that some point last spring, I know Lisa Loomis was desperately trying to get some information on that as well.
Okay.
And was kind of not getting very far, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But the landowners are
sorry. back to-
interested in getting rid of that parcel.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Oh, Becca.
So, okay.
Back up.
Great, well, thank you for that. Is there, it sounds like York's leading the charge on that grant application process, is that?
Right now, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see, we're all gonna work on it,
Yeah.
depending on when we get it in, he's gonna be heading to Africa for a few weeks, so.
Okay.
Well, no.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, but it was really his idea, and it was great, so I think, it's exciting to see.
Yeah.
And, we had a conversation on tax, we're still not at the point where we know what to do as far as the master planning grant for the fall.
Yeah.
Both in the deliverable from SE Group, but also in what is the state gonna say, what is our path forward? So, I still think there's a good chance we might wanna pursue it, and maybe this CDBG grant, maybe we just wanna focus on that for now. And maybe we wait till next fall for another master planning grant. Well, I think we'll see, but the
Yeah.
application's not too intense. November 3rd deadline does give us some time.
Yeah, I think it makes sense at this point. My feeling is until we really have any direction
Mhm.
from
SE
wetlands,
group.
yeah,
And just circling back, in conversations York had with the stream alteration specialist, it does look like the state will provide an engineer to do a hydraulic study for that area. As just
Says who?
just for, says York. So we might be getting some information from the state for free. So,
All the more reason to hold off on pursuing
Yeah.
the municipal planning.
for now.
yeah, if there's significant
Yeah.
opportunity to
Yep.
find other resources.
And if we have that going on and, maybe we hold off until the fall and then we look at other wetland analyses in that area.
Yeah, there may be some really good work we can do in the meantime
Yeah,
that
yeah.
helps to make the case better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you for filling us in on that. So I didn't know that was even
Yeah.
in consideration,
Yeah,
so very
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, extremely cool.
Any other questions on the village master plan? I know Becca, you just joined, but we've basically gone through at this point the brief response we got from wetlands, from Shannon. That basically just says, we're still looking into it. We haven't, we received it. We're running up the chain and we'll, and promised us some more clarity in response. Hopefully we'll see that. And then ran through the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant proposal that is in the packet regarding a potential revamped culvert or potentially bridge at Carroll Road off of 100. Oh, and we lost again. All right.
And pond, and pond.
Yeah, in the pond, in the town pond. All right, so seeing no further questions on that, we can move forward. Our next item of business is an update on wastewater. And I think JB, that falls on you today, since Bob is overseas.
Yep, tomorrow we're having a meeting with Du Bois and King and then Simon Operator Services who do our water to talk about running the system and just getting back on the same page. It's been about a couple years since we brought them into a meeting. That'll be with Nate Fredericks, who's our water operator, and his boss, Lane. So that'll be good. We have a hefty agenda for that. Yesterday, we had the kickoff meeting with what is going to be probably a relatively short-lived, I said short-lived, but a finance committee for the wastewater project. And that was our treasurer, Steve Lewis, it was York, Chach Curtis, Josh, myself, and John Jameson. So that was kind of getting
John Jameson,
correct. Yep,
has he been involved?
he is not, but this is a different discussion. It's kind of a different stage of the project. So we're looking at how we're gonna fund it,
Oh,
given federal landscape and the lack of grants, the absence of the grants we had hoped for. To pay for the project. So this is all in advance of a big meeting, which is Wednesday, September 24th. It's a select board wastewater workshop. It'll begin at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and go for quite some time.
with the new finance committee,
Mhm.
with the new finance
Just with the
committee.
wastewater project team.
Oh, the
So,
whole wastewater.
Yeah, so I
project
think
team.
this finance team's gonna come up with some recommendations to present to the select board. Which we're working on. It is not public yet. So as I said, so we did sign on
Wow.
for the $8 million loan and $649,000 grant from the USDA. It's a yellow light, it's not a green light. We're not obligated to take it, but that would be for the first phase of the project, which would go from Fiddler's Green to approximately the old TD Bank. The next phase is so that is approximately $12 million.
So what does that mean, yellow light?
It means
Not a green light.
we're not obligated right now to pursue it, even though
Oh,
we signed off on that.
But it
so
is a real thing.
It is a
though.
real thing, yes, yeah.
Okay, they offered it.
So we
to
signed
us.
it and we can always say, oh, we don't want to go through these loan application.
So basically have locked in
We've
the
locked-
availability of those
Yes,
loans to do
exactly,
the
yes,
project.
and we had to,
because,
they gave it less than 24
As I
hours.
say, there was really no alternative.
Yes.
We knew there would not be a second
Yeah.
package coming. If
Yes,
we did pick this one.
exactly, we asked if we
Sorry,
could,
Becca's back in.
we asked if we could include the the phase from the bank to the school, and they said, no, this is it. And so we are going after the Northern Borders Regional Commission grant for $1 million for that other phase of the project, which is approximately 2.5 million. That'll go, that would be the pump station at the school and the collection system there.
Okay,
And then that also requires a 20% non-federal match.
Yeah.
We had a meeting today with the school district this morning
You're going
at over at
fast.
Waitsfield School. Well, it's all up here. So we had
Yeah.
wastewater day. And so we just we provided an update to them, and I think it's gonna be on a coming school board agenda, of which I will present an update to the school board and the district on the Waitsfield wastewater project.
And when will that be?
I think it's actually gonna be Wednesday night,
Wednesday?
a week from
night?
tomorrow. Yep.
For the school board, you're gonna update the school board
Correct, yes.
on what's happening.
Yep. So yeah, so the meeting on the 24th will be a big one. We will be presenting a plan to fund the system. And that is all I can hear. Other than that, 90 design rolls on. Yeah, just technical stuff.
yep,
Lots of tree work, tree location, little stuff like that, stuff that engineers do.
Design
Bob?
work is still on.
Ongoing, yeah, I think,
To be completed this January.
believe January, or is it this spring? Yeah, I mean, we're on course. Nothing has changed as far as that. It's been a while now since I thought about when the design was due. Or due to be completed, but one holdup has been the Department of Historic Preservation is we had gotten in our plans back in October of last year. And due to various miscues, they have not gotten back to us on
The historic preservation.
Yeah.
Of historic.
so they
preservation.
look at the design, and they provide input as to areas might need further study due to potential historic
Mhm.
resources.
Mhm.
So it's been way overdue.
Mm.
So I think that's all I have for wastewater.
all right. Well, I'm glad it's continuing to
Yeah.
move,
Encourage planning commissioners that it's, the meeting on the 24th is open to the public.
okay,
I think we're gonna be here. There's potential food. I'm not sure how that's all gonna shake out. But
That's,
it will be a
Wednesday.
publicly warned meeting.
So
What
is
time,
it-
JB?
1 o'clock.
Thank you.
And it's a, like a public hearing?
It's a war meeting of the select board, but it's basically a wastewater workshop. So we're gonna update them in the system, where we are, where we need to go, and the team will be proposing a path to funding the system.
Yeah, please.
it's too hot and it's too cold
Right?
every time. Right, well, don't get too comfortable, 'cause I think you're also on deck to talk to us about the this thing that I cannot pronounce every time I come to it, the local level outdoor recreation economic impact project.
To be absolutely honest, what you see in here is kind of what I've, we're still waiting on the final toolkit. I did talk to Alex, and I'm hoping that Lydia Jankowski will be able to come to a meeting via
Okay.
Zoom and kind of present what the goals of the toolkit are, how we can use it, and all that. But basically, everything so far, aside from that initial site visit I had with Josh and the SE group team, was data collection. So that's
Yeah.
all that's gone on in the background.
Okay.
And it took a little bit longer to get some of the data, especially from the Chamber of Commerce, but I think we, in the end, a good package of data was provided, and what
Well, you-
they do with that and how they turn it into the toolkit remains to be seen. As I said, I was not available for the two meetings that Josh and Sam and York had with the SE group team. But what you've seen here is, and I have not myself had the opportunity to necessarily go through all the documents that were in the shared with us, so.
Okay.
But it is, I think I highlighted the drive or
It was,
the
in the
link
packet.
in there.
The link was in the packet, and what it was a survey.
There's actually
there
a
was-
shared Google Drive that has some, but a lot of it was that
When you
research.
gave feedback to them
Mhm.
on their survey. For example, and, correct me if I'm wrong, you said, it would be good if you gave businesses multiple opportunities, because, for example, we've got the Mad Bush that has retail, it has a restaurant, it's got housing. So it's really not a fair assessment of that business.
Yeah,
So please give more than one line
Mhm.
for each business. To have a better reflection of the businesses we have in the valley.
Mhm. More narrowly tailored.
So that was a feedback you gave to them.
That was,
Right.
that was the committee themselves, like Josh and York and Sam, yeah,
Oh, okay.
yes, yeah. So hopefully, once that's complete, and I think they were hoping to have this done by the end of September, maybe we could have Lydia in at some point in October.
that'd be great,
or
yeah.
November at the worst. It'd be good to
And
get it in advance of the winter tourism economy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like there's a lot in this, even just in the write-up that you included in the packet, but it's dense and.
Yes, it is
Well,
dense.
I see the potential of taking the results of this and using it in the town plan,
Mhm. We
you
do the next major update.
just to make sure that we are incorporating their goals and recommendations.
Yeah,
In our town plan.
Yeah.
It would
well,
be
and,
super
yeah,
helpful.
just to sort of help identify,
Goals.
key
Mhm.
areas of our, potential improvement and success, and. Yeah, I think it could be super helpful, so I'm excited to spend a little more time reading it, because I didn't have time to really get through the packet on this, but. But I know they were preparing like a toolkit, web-based toolkit that we're supposed to have access to, so that'll be good to look at. Thank you.
And what's her name?
Lydia Jankowski, Jankowski, I believe. She's from SE Group.
Oh. To give
It's kind of a brief presentation on the
brief
how
presentation.
the toolkit was generated and how it can be used by the town.
And they're creating the toolkit based on,
Our town and
Our
then the other three towns as well.
So they did include the other towns in their scope.
Yeah, it's all,
Oh, great.
yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure how that was gonna come out.
and it's a toolkit then that could be used for all towns.
Correct. Yep.
Mhm.
Right, well, then our next item of business is our 2025 to 2026 work plan. This is also our second to last item of business, but I think we have lots to talk about. I don't know if we want to, I think probably the bigger item to talk about is the short-term rentals. I don't know if we want to. Dig in at all into the town plan.
It was more or less for reference. It's certainly not a big lift.
Yeah.
It's really putting in, adding
Yeah.
a couple sentences.
I don't know, if
talk
anyone
about
looked at the.
Yeah, and the town, obviously Neck of the Woods is one of the bigger childcare facilities in central Vermont. And I think beyond, DRB permitting and what have you, the town has certainly supported that with ARPA awards. They also gave that to the Waitsfield Children's Center before it closed its doors, and that was passed on to Neck of the Woods when it assumed. So I think the town has really done a lot to advocate for childcare here, and so that could really be summed up pretty succinctly. So I
Yeah.
think that's a relatively low hanging fruit. And I do
And you have the information
Absolutely, yeah,
because
yeah.
you've been a part of it
Mhm.
from the
Yeah.
get-go.
And it's, and because those ARPA monies were provided after we updated the town plan, now there's even more support, or even more that we can show that their town is really supporting childcare here. So, and I do, as the email from Alice, which I included in there, it makes absolute sense to just do this as an amendment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of changes at the state level, and I imagine there's gonna be a relatively sizable overhaul of our town
Yeah.
plan. So I think we should just nip this
Yeah.
one in the bud
But-
and
I
get
think
ourselves a few years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I agree. And it sounds like we have until 2027 to complete these amendments, but
Yeah.
I think it's low hanging fruit. We can.
We
It is, yeah.
we-
We probably wanna do it, I would say. Doing it, maybe we initiate the process in the winter, or the spring. I mean,
Yeah,
to be honest, when we could, I can always come up with something. And we can have, keep it on the agenda for a couple of meetings, and we can go ahead and warn an amendment at any time. I think. I don't wanna wait too long, cause as more of these things change at the state, then they might say, oh, well, you might need to do a little bit more, and I think
Yeah,
it might be
I
the
think we
sooner,
just get out
sooner
ahead
the
of it.
better, so maybe we could. Put a pin in that and maybe try to get it done this winter.
yeah. So I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So we have to make the childcare adjustment or the language. Do we need additional language also on housing and transit?
Those
Or
are
is it just-
suggestions.
Oh, those
They're
are
just
suggestions.
suggestions, so we can keep those in mind for,
Yeah.
yeah.
But we don't have to do that.
No,
for the
it's
others.
the childcare requirement that was the
Okay.
one.
That's what I thought. I
Yeah.
just couldn't recall like which ones
Yeah.
were mandatory. So
That was their feedback letter from our
Yeah.
town plan, but it was a childcare one that.
that was the
That was
actual
yeah.
miss from what is required.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, we'll fix that. I think that's a quick.
Just as a side, I went to GTP
GTP.
and asked what was Vermont State Planning Goal number 13.
Mhm.
And they couldn't provide it for me, but they said Vermont has 14 specific state planning goals that towns must address in their town plans to receive approval. These goals are part of a municipal regional planning development act.
Mhm.
24 VSA, chapter 117. To get exact details on goal number 13, I recommend checking the Vermont Planning Atlas or contacting the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for more information. So I was just curious what that goal 13 was, what the wording was, and my AI didn't have it.
Yeah, I should.
But I thought it was interesting that it was a Vermont state planning goal, and they have 14 planning goals that they are asking all the towns to have in their town plans,
Yeah.
otherwise they're not getting approved.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, I think. tells
So
you
it
how
must
much
have
work is
been-
gonna have to
yeah.
go into it.
So that was their Act 24 VSA
Yeah,
that was passed.
yeah. So it was an oversight on our part not to include it in the first pass.
Well, how would we have known? I guess our Central Vermont community.
Yeah.
Would have been the ones to fill us in on some of the law.
Which they did, I think,
Oh, they did?
well, that was that consultation letter, and I can't recall exactly when in the process that came in.
Yeah,
And.
We missed it.
we missed it. But we'll
Okay.
remedy that.
yeah.
We have plenty to support what the town has done to
Yeah,
support
and it's,
childcare.
thankfully, it's a pretty forgiving process.
Yeah.
As long as you do your best
Mhm.
there. To work with you.
And it seems like they think highly of our town plan overall, so.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and really all we missed was a one sentence. Conclusion that, we do in fact have childcare options. Although I think elaborating a little on the support that the town has given is.
Yeah.
All
Okay,
right,
so I just wanted to do a little background research into
Yeah.
that.
absolutely. So our next item under the work plan is short-term rentals. Thank you, Emma, for this really excellent summary.
Absolutely.
That was super helpful, especially this week. I was running around quite a bit, so I was able to sit down and actually ingest this summary and have some sense of, yeah, what's out there. I found it interesting that basically it appears from the summary at least that really all of the most restrictive ordinances and treatments out there are Canadian, largely in BC, which is maybe not shocking given the challenges that BC's winter tourism real estate markets have faced. But there was a fair amount, I think Stowe, certainly is doing, I think, more sort of direct regulation than I had known. So that's interesting as well. So yeah, I'm curious people's thoughts on this and what jumps out as either something that the commission or any of us on the commission think is worth trying to pursue. What does anything feel overreaching? Is it, I don't know if there's sort of a general sense there.
I had a response to reading Killington's. I know we talked about safety last week as being kind of one of our main goals. And one of the things I kept thinking about after our meeting was that horrible accident that happened last year. And it made it onto my Facebook feed about a family that went, I think it was in Connecticut, went and stayed in a cabin, put on the fireplace stove, wood burning stove, got it going, left their kids inside, went outside and hung outside for a little bit. Next thing you know, the house burnt down and there was no fire alarms. And so they didn't know, and they lost, I can't remember who all died, but let's just say I have a family of 4. There's 1 to 2 living people and children died because they had been put to bed. Whether a parent also died, I don't know. So this, I don't recall the details. So that to me, like, I feel like is something that is a nerve that, that kind of thing could happen. And I just think, how lucky are we that wasn't Waitsfield, right? That's the stuff we don't want happening, and we don't want happening anywhere. And we certainly don't want it in our community. And so I just kind of, that was just something that stuck out, right? As something we really, what is that?
Yeah,
More
absolutely.
than
I
just
think
even
that's,
recognizing
it
it.
seems to me like that's the sort of bare minimum that we should do if we're doing anything is the safety focused,
Yeah.
sort of regulatory compliant piece.
I'm
Yes.
so surprised that short-term rental companies like Airbnb and Vrbo, that they don't have agents that come in and make sure that sort of thing is done.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
there's
don't
way
want
too many.
There's too many and they don't want to know. They don't want
They don't want
Yeah.
the liability. Yeah,
I
they want
think
the,
if we did something simply saying that they have to be to code would cover it, because anytime you rent a room,
Yeah,
a unit, it becomes a public building and falls underneath the public fire code. So it's got to have smoke alarms, it's got to have CO2 alarms, it's got to have proper handrails, a fire extinguisher, proper egress. So if we simply made a notation that if you're doing this, you have to say certify that your place is to code, that will at least make people aware of what it needs to be.
Plugged in is the
Beth, we missed a portion of what you said. We're not having good internet here in the office.
I was gonna say it could be me too. No,
I
I was
can hear
saying
you
that,
fine.
what I, saw some of the, if we provided like a permit or a license or something, one of the requirements could be a certification that it's to code. And, the code would be the public building code. As soon as you rent a room, it becomes a public building.
So it wouldn't be the International Residential Code.
It's whatever the fire code is in Vermont for a public building. I don't know the name of the exact code, but it becomes a public building and falls under the public safety codes. The major things that we see the fire marshal point out are working smoke alarms, proper egress windows, not having beds in lofts that don't have secondary means of escape. If there is a height, if the second floor is too high, Is the building sprinkled? You know, all of those things. And I think if people truly knew what the code was, it might give them second thoughts
Yeah.
on what they're doing.
And that wouldn't
Oh.
even be self-certification, right? But I mean, like, if you actually require them to state that they are a rented building, the fire marshal actually has to come and sign off on it.
Yeah, he would. And I'm sure Stan would gladly do that. I mean,
Oh,
safety
yeah,
is a
yeah.
Yeah.
big thing for
And
him.
I don't think we would have to, because we don't want people self-certifying that, because
Right, right.
like
Yeah.
then
One
like
thing.
it kind of defeats the purpose. Like some people will maybe take a second look at their CO alarms, but will everyone? No. So I feel like that actual physical enforcement is important.
And who would be the enforcer?
The fire marshal.
And so is this something that we would require? Because then, I mean, the fire marshal, to get the fire marshal, it would take a lot of time. I mean, that we don't have a lot of fire marshals in this state. in
It
other words.
happens a lot with sales of buildings. I mean,
Yeah.
and residential
with
rental
my house.
units. I mean,
Right.
that's what he's there for, and what he
Yeah.
does. And yes, it does take time, and there's an expense involved. But I think if we truly want to do this, we should make people get on his calendar.
Yeah.
And when we sold our last house, we rented back from the new owners for 3 months before moving into this house. And because it was then technically a rented building, their lawyer suggested that we go through this fire marshal process, which unleashed a whole can of worms I don't think they were expecting either.
Yeah.
But we got a visit from the fire marshal, and I put in a lot of really stupid looking handrails. But it can be done, and it didn't take that long.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's. I think that also would address a lot of the sort of friction between the sort of in community and the short-term rental community, where, you know, there is a significantly higher bar to operating a licensed
In or
or
something,
hotel.
absolutely.
And a big part of that is the fire marshal. I've heard from many business owners in the valley that the fire marshal is a constant source of expense, which, I mean, for a good reason, like
For
we
good
have
reason.
housing stock,
Absolutely.
and a lot of it's not particularly fire safe. I think
Mhm.
that would, imposing that kind of requirement is definitely going to raise some hackles on the part of short-term rental owners, but I think it's a totally reasonable step for the
Totally
town to take.
reasonable.
And clearly other towns like ours have taken it.
Mhm.
For exactly the reason I think that, Becca and others have noted, which is we don't want to be in the news because there was a tragedy in our town
Yeah.
that could have potentially been avoided by, taking some steps to make sure that short-term rentals were meeting fire code.
Mhm.
One of the most common reasons Jared goes on fire calls in the winter is misused fireplaces and wood stoves in short-term rentals.
I bet.
Like it's just
Yeah.
people don't know how to use them, and they're there and they look so charming, and there's just a lot of ways to screw that up. As it turns
Yeah,
out.
well, I mean, which begs the question, what, if everything is up to code and somebody from Florida comes on up to ski and they never use the fireplace and it's really their error, how does that
I
shake
feel like
out?
that's your liability at that point.
Yeah.
Like what you're willing
Yeah.
to tolerate as a homeowner and landlord.
Yeah.
And there
but
are different levels of insurance specifically for short-term rentals, because I looked into it for a different property at one point, and I got scared by Facebook and all the conversations that are out there about people destroying houses. But though they have those, the insurers that really insure you are really strict on the safety stuff. They're like, on having smoke detectors in every bedroom and whatnot. So
I suspect that even if there's, pushback from the community of owners, I don't think that that's an area where it makes sense for, like, to take a strong stand as a pro STR lobbying industry group, because you would imagine that nobody really wants to be on the side of make these STRs less safe and more disaster prone. I mean, the premise is that they are safe. you know, places for families to rent. And so I would think that, you know, well, yes, there could be some cost involved. Those are costs that, yeah, everyone's insurance that is running their property as an Airbnb or whatever, is not going to be happy to pay out claims if they're not, you know, up to code, if they're not compliant and they're renting to non-full-time residents. So I don't see a real basis for complaint on that. Yeah, so I do think that the Killington, you know, sort of example of focusing on those safety components, the insurance component, the parking and sort of maximum occupancy are really valuable, as well as the mandatory local contact, which is another thing that
Oh,
Lauren was
absolutely.
focused on.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that can come with the registration procedure.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to take a Warren approach of like a relatively light-handed approach to begin with, just to start gathering data and find out if that's enough, rather than going too aggressively with a first launch of a program like this.
That's fair. Yeah, I think what would be like most useful to the select board is to sort of give them that array. I think this summary is incredibly helpful for discussing with them, but I think sort of
ChatGPT is really helpful for stuff like this.
I believe it.
There is something to be said about, and just to counter the low hanging fruit, and I'm just trying to think, if I was a short-term rental owner, I almost want to know what's coming. So I'd almost rather it all come at once.
But maybe
than-
nothing else is coming.
Right. So my point is that we should think about the whole array of what we would possibly want, and you know, and present that to the select board of, these are the options. What do you want? Because I think you have a certain number of swings at this, and then you've kind of become really annoying to short-term rental owners.
I think that sort of public discussion of what the options are and why the town is going the way it is, and leaving the door open for further, you know, expanding the regulation makes sense. And it might even be the kind of thing that the select board may want to adopt, sort of a tiered approach where they start with one, and then there are certain thresholds that if they hit, then that would mean that we move to a slightly more you know,
That I
aggressive
think is a really great idea, because that gets away from the multiple hits where you know what's coming. So part of it could be, look, if our, you know, full-time residents to second homeowners exceeds X percent, we're looking more like Warren, then the town would like to maybe put in some restrictions on where they can go. And here it comes in, right? Because some of these things are really feel like they're beyond what we would possibly want right now. And so I'm giving that example because I think that's the one that's going to cause the most issue. But if you have a number and you say, look, you have until we hit this ratio, you know, people feel like they're being seen and heard now, and they're also grandfathered in. Because that's the other part of this, is people who have short-term rentals right now, it really kind of is hard to, you know, put non-safety restrictions on them.
Yeah.
You are cutting into their business, right? You know, so the seasonal to day limits is a really great idea for helping out with rental stock in the community. But at the same time, you know, changing current short-term rentals and making them be year-round. There's a reason people choose to do both. One of them is nice because you don't have to find people all the time and manage them. The other one is nice because there's actually less damage to your house when you have a short-term rental than when you have a long-term rental, right? So there's reasons people are choosing these things that have nothing to do with they could have nothing to do with all of this other conversation we're having. And it's nice to leave it for them to make those decisions.
I kind of like interpreting this number 2 principal resident requirement, which they're going neighborhood by neighborhood, which honestly in Waitsfield, I don't think makes that much sense. There's no one area Waitsfield where I think is unacceptable for short-term rentals.
I would disagree.
Well, can I finish my thought first?
Yeah.
So I would ask the question of what do we think about, like, once we have a registration process, like everyone that already has one and is meeting fire code can register. So then we know how many we have. And then we set something like a cap of like short-term rental registrants cannot exceed 5% of housing units in Waitsfield or 10% of housing units in Waitsfield, something like that. That doesn't go by zoning district, but just like sets a cap of how many total units can participate in this activity. And I know of a few jurisdictions that take a similar, just like cap number of short-term rental units approach like that, where they just have to wait for someone to stop doing it if they want to start one.
Mhm. I would be all for that. My input was, that I could see Iversville and the Village as potential overlay districts. Because they have smaller, housing stock there. And that's where we need to have our, workforce housing, is in those smaller districts. And what I'm speaking of is, at one point in time, I did a search for Airbnbs because I wanted to stay at a cabin for a while away from my house, but in Vermont. And I was surprised at how many Airbnbs are in the Village. You know, the second floor
Yeah.
of a building.
Yeah,
And I just thought, you know, there is a perfect example of an Airbnb that's taking away from workforce housing.
So some of those Airbnbs, because I know somebody who owns one. I don't know if it's technically in Irisville or not, but they have a unit that doesn't have a kitchen, and so they rely on people going to the VG, right? So then you get to that primary resident who's kind of staying there, right? Who's making it work. So I think there's a little bit of a question there: are those apartments that could otherwise be rented out, or are they primary landowners who are trying to stay in their property? Because I think there's a little bit of both of those going on right there currently. And so I don't know how we balance that. But I
Yeah.
think I hear your point on new. I think this is where you get to the difference between grandfathered in, right, versus future. I think, you know, we've definitely expressed as a group that our desire is the housing that is going to go in, hopefully with this wastewater treatment, will not be short-term rental. And so I think that's an important overlay that goes in when we build that property. And maybe back to the cap idea, the downtown area can have X number, but they're going to be people who don't have transportation. And so the fact that they can get to the VG and they can get their breakfast and then they can hop on the bus that goes up to Sugarbush is super important to them. And, you know, whatever they're doing, and it might be cheaper housing, then maybe you can get up near Sugarbush. So there's a kind of I was just curious about that.
yeah, I think that, you know, similar to how, I mean, I think for very different reasons, it's similar how Woodstock has handled their permitting numbers system. I think if we did, one way that the select board could address community concerns about the wastewater project's impact on construction types in Irisville. We know that there's a lot of community concern about constructing new dense housing in Irisville. It becomes purely dedicated to short-term rentals.
Exactly.
I think that could be a reason that the select board considers approaching Irisville and the Villages as, you know, more of like a capped permit system. But I think that like the first step in all of that is understanding what the current situation is and having registration so that we actually know what is already there. Because if they're going to set caps, I would assume that the idea would be we set the cap essentially at where it is prior to wastewater going in. And then don't allow any additional units to enter the system from there. If there's transition out of short-term rental from some existing units, you know, I guess the question would be, do they allow those to then be transferred to, or, you know, they issue new permits to, which is something I think that could be, you know, part of the implementation, but But I think that's probably I think that would be the
Mhm.
reason
Mhm.
and the sort of public relations approach to having an overlay district like that would be to address specific community concerns. Cause I think I agree, with, I think it was Emma said something about, not feeling like there's anywhere in the valley or in Waitsfield that feels like there shouldn't be, or it's sort of incompatible to have short-term rentals. I certainly don't think it's incompatible with current use to have short-term rentals in Irisville or the village, and we have inns in those neighborhoods. But to the extent that we are aware of community concerns about constructing new, multifamily units that are dedicated to short-term rentals, I think that's where that sort of incompatibility, not necessarily with the current use of those spaces, but with the planning goals for those spaces, I think does maybe come
I mean, we
in.
could say something like similar to the idea I posited before, like no more than 10% of housing units in the valley may be used for short-term rentals. So you could just say like 10% of units per zoning area, maybe short-term rentals. But I think you'd have to grandfather everyone else in first. And then if it happens right now that like, oh, well, shoot, like the villages is 20%, then like no one else gets in, but we just wait for it to peter down to 10 eventually. But you could do it that way. And then that way, like, I feel like that's maybe not overly prescriptive. And
I like
Becca,
that way.
to your point about owner occupancy, I feel pretty strongly that if it's an owner occupied, like the owner lives there, but their short-term rental is a completely separate unit, I feel like that doesn't matter that the owner lives there because that could be easily rented to a year-round tenant. Like the one situation where owner occupancy really matters is if it's like really old school Airbnb where they're just renting out their guest room and they are also there at the same time. That to me like falls totally like that should still be registered, but maybe shouldn't even apply to like a 10% cap that we're throwing in because that's not taking up space where someone might live.
I think our 10% cap should just be our 10% cap. I don't disagree with you, Emma, about it. I just feel like you're getting really nuanced, and the more nuances that you end up with, the harder it is, and the more complicated it is, and the more loopholes, and the more this, and the more that.
I mean, I started
So
out with
I
the
think
least nuances.
right, exactly. So I think saying, we're going to have a 10% or whatever it is, let's look at what the numbers are and figure this part out. But let's say it's 10% cap, and then we find out that, oh, by the way, actually that's really hurting us. We can shift it over time. But the idea that, it's 15, 20%, let's say in the villages right now, and now it comes down over time to 10%, great. And then people can start getting back in if they want to. But it provides that that flexibility there. But there is a point of telling people what to do with their property that Vermonters will definitely not particularly like with this all.
Yeah.
Well, and how is it
Someone has something to
how
complain
is
about
it
everything.
enforced? Yeah, and how is it enforced?
I think that's the big, yeah.
Something we'll have to work out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe the fees, like what Warren is doing for registration, would cover a staff person.
So in Massachusetts, where I looked into doing a short-term rental at one point, I would have had to pay a tax, and I was allowed to rent up to, I think it was 10 days a year before you pay taxes or some magic number. I don't remember what it was. So something pretty low in that randomness of, it's not being a huge business. And then once you're over that, you actually have to pay Massachusetts tax. So I don't know if there's anything like that in Vermont. So that might be a question, is whether the state is collecting taxes and requiring taxes.
You're supposed to for anything over $600.
Okay, so that might be part of the process.
And Airbnb, I believe in Verbo collects taxes. Yeah.
They do it for you, and they require it, and they require you go through the paperwork before you can set it up. So that's how part of the way we're going to enforce it is we literally are working. We'd have to work with the state somehow, but in order to do this through the through the means that currently exist, the major means, you know, there are obviously word of mouth, but through these platforms, they're going to collect that money for us, and they're going to collect it for the state, so we will know. Or we should be able to figure out a way to know.
I mean, Burlington collects a 9% gross receipt tax on revenue earned from STR activity.
And that's the other thing is that at some point there is the argument, right, of what is the wear and tear and the use of these on our having short-term rentals on our community, and does that mean that we are paying more as taxpayers to maintain our community, or are we getting more revenue in through the income that these people are generating for us in our economy, right? And I don't have the answer to that, but that's where the need for a short local fee comes in.
I just did a quick search on Airbnb and it says there are over 1,000 listings in Waitsfield, Vermont. And do we not have 1,800 housing units total?
And that doesn't.
Yeah, that's not.
Seems.
They must be bleeding into Facein and Warren without
Absolutely.
saying
Yeah,
so.
seems like a
If
radius
not-
issue.
More.
Does it do it by zip code, Emma?
I just typed in Waitsfield and it
Waitsfield,
says
yeah.
over 1,000 homes in Waitsfield. Oh wait, this one is clearly in Moortown. Right. Well,
Yes,
I
it's
would like
probably
to be more
Moortown,
specific.
Waitsfield, based in maybe even Warren.
Yeah.
But you figure that's at least 300 in Waitsfield, right? Just to take the 3 towns and divide it up. It's not inconsequential, a percent of our.
No, it's not. I think Warren has almost doubled them in Waitsfield.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, is it Warren 50% short-term
I
rental?
don't know the percentage.
I don't think it's
Yeah.
30% short-term rental, but it's definitely 50% non-primary residents.
Yeah.
50% non-primary.
it's over that.
17% primary residents, something like that.
Yeah, something crazy low when we lived there.
Mhm.
Which just makes sense with all those condos.
Yeah, that's the thing, is a lot of it is not single-family residences,
Yep.
it's condo units. So
And
it's,
Facein has more more condos than we do in Waitsfield too, I think.
yeah, because they have,
Mount Ellen.
yeah,
Mhm.
so, yeah, there aren't really any large condo buildings in Waitsfield at the moment. Yeah, I think that the enforcement question becomes a big one about, how do we actually enforce things? Like what degree of active enforcement is the select board interested in, and, makes sense from a community resources standpoint. And that I think is a big open question, and yeah, I'm hesitant to really guess at what the select board wants there, in particular, because that's such a resource intensive question. We don't have, a police force or, other public safety sort of resources that are this Fred. And I don't think Fred wants to be going knocking on
No.
Airbnb doors.
Well, if we collected some kind of fee or raised extra revenue, could that be used to bolster support if we have contracts with the sheriff or state police or whatever, supporting more firefighting presence? I mean, that's one way to think of it, is if you're going to be subjecting the town to additional needs, then help pay for some of these resources.
And likewise, getting the fire marshal to come in, it should cost you $50 or whatever it is for the time. I mean, I had to pay that when I sold the house, right? It's the same process.
I think it's 125 for an inspection.
Okay, so that's what it is. Like, I don't think it's not, I think it's just part of your doing business, just like having the cleaning person come in and clean between tenants. And the question is how often we require it be done. Is it yearly? Is it bi-yearly? Is it 6 months? There's probably some statute that we should point to, but
Yeah, I think on the fire front, I mean, the town won't see the revenue from that, but I think certainly, yeah, the fire marshal piece of it is statutorily dictated. But yeah, I think our permitting can, you know, whatever the select board decides, but it could certainly be like an annual registration fee, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And
And the annual registration fee should cover the, whatever computer software we need and the manpower for looking at that. And then, if it's one of those things that, to Beth's point, if we're finding that it costs more, then we can change the fee, but it shouldn't be higher than what is reasonable for our costs. And this shouldn't be some way we're making revenue to pay for something else, unless that's literally we're having to pay a contract for police to come out X amount, and so we need you guys to cover it because we are now having to cover that cost because of your existence, right? That's to be directly related.
Yeah, well, I think it also is, as far as justification for enforcing and creating these sorts of rules. I don't know if we have data, the town has data on sort of the number of calls from short-term rentals to the fire department and other public safety resources. But that's a cost that the town is currently bearing with no compensation from, people who are participating in the short-term rental market. So I think it's totally reasonable to shift some of that cost onto owners. And so that kind of information could be useful. So that it's easier to sort of explain to owners of those properties what cost it is that they are creating for the town that is not being captured in the, in what they pay to maintain their properties and list on various websites and whatever else they have to do. So I think it would be helpful to have some of that information, and the select board may or may not have that information. But it'd be worth sort of looking into, see what we can find out. Yeah, I do want to come back, I guess, to the principal residency question.
Yeah.
I think I don't think, I know that's going to be a significant concern for the select board. I know that there is at least one select board member who is particularly concerned that an ordinance about short-term rentals is going to prevent people from renting their property for either, the period between Thanksgiving and New Year's, which is a historically popular time to rent a primary residence to then pay for, heat and taxes and whatever other carrying costs for retired residents. And so I suspect that the select board will want whatever, information we give them to include ideas about how to differentiate between principal residence and, a non-occupied property. Or
I think that, oh,
It should
sorry,
still be
Emma.
safe.
What's that?
What?
It should still, like, just because it's an owner occupied building most of the year, it should still meet fire code if you're renting it out.
Yeah, I
And like a basic registration, basic fire code, and like 10% per zoning area. Like, I don't think that that's that extreme of a bar that we're sort of proposing here, with where it seems we're coalescing.
I don't think that, I certainly don't think that there would be pushback from the select board on requiring even those properties to meet code requirements and safety requirements. I think there will be pushback, and again, it doesn't mean we shouldn't, advocate for whatever we think is right, but I do think that there will be pushback to including them under a cap, or maybe better put, to preventing someone from doing that because they are not within the cap, because they didn't
Okay,
get credit.
So back
this
to
is-
the whole 14-day thing, I did just look it up for Vermont, and the meals and room tax does not kick in if you are under 14 days in one calendar year. So, we're looking at people who are usually renting for 10, if you, instead of 14 days, you can do 13 days and you are fine. Or 14 days more than, so 14, you don't do 15.
And this is sort of like comes back to my original suggestion of just fire code and registration, just to get the information of like what are the units that we have and where are they, and then to like impose a cap later for exactly this purpose. Like, how many, like, is this even an issue? How many
Yeah.
of these like owner occupied units are there? How many of them will like self remove themselves from this process because dealing with fire code updates is not going to be worth their while? So like there's that too. So I honestly am fine with either or. But like those questions of like, oh, what about this person is solved by just taking an information gathering year first and then imposing a step 2 on year 2. But I also think that like 10% is an extremely generous cap for zoning area, especially since we're suggesting we would grandfather in everyone. So I don't think that's particularly crazy either to just start off with off the bat.
Maybe what we're doing actually is saying we are considering a cap. We're considering grandfathering everybody in and putting in a cap. We're exploring what the cap would look like, because I feel like we don't even know if 10% is the right number, or we're kind of pulling that out of the air right now. Maybe it's actually 20%. I don't honestly know what the number actually really looks like in our community. So I also support the idea that we are fact finding, and if people want to know that there'd be a cap, I'm fine with saying that we're looking at one. But you're grandfathered, back to that point.
Yeah, I guess
I agree.
I doubt that it's a large scale problem, but I always worry with like an announcement like that you end up with a race to everybody list their house on Airbnb, even if they don't want to.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Don't want to get.
Okay, but then I think maybe it's anybody, we are not people who have been listing their houses and actively paying tax. Maybe it's something like that, right? Like you're making the threshold of 14 days and have been for the last 3 years, kind of thing. You don't have to have done it last year, but you did it the year before. You're going to be fine.
And I think it also could be, again, like I think the structure of rules could be such that, it is responsive to changes, right? And so if if the rule starts off as simply a registration, and the way that the state often does, they'll sort of add components, with like a year or so timeline. If it begins with registration and, some kind of database of what's going on, and, there's a built-in assessment after some period of, if the determination is that either more than some percentage of properties are, in fact being rented short-term, or some other sort of triggers, then the town sort of reserves the right to impose additional rules, such as creating a cap at that point, which would potentially have the reverse incentive of, if the town ever hits that point, then there's suddenly a cap versus, whatever is available before then is automatically grandfathered in. So I don't know what the right answer is. But I think sort of approaching it from the perspective of, yeah, what tools are out there? What does the planning commission think could be good elements of a ordinance? What sort of doesn't feel like a good element? I think that's really, really useful.
We may also in a step 2 want something like want to figure out what some sort of enforcement or like removal from the registration process would look like, if we're just pretty generous in year 1, but like we know how Alice feels about the Airbnb in her neighborhood. If Alice wants to call and like lodge a complaint against, short-term rental number 103, maybe there's like, if you get 3 complaints, you're removed for a year or something like that. Well, we want to think through what that looks like. And if we want to start with that, or if that's like just get everyone in the door, figure out what's happening, and then in year 2, figure out what the enforcement mechanism needs to be.
I think that's a
Could we use
huge,
a zoning permit?
huge
I mean,
thing to open up.
we
that.
have, go ahead, Becca.
I was just gonna say, I think that's a huge kettle of worms to open up, right?
Totally.
Because I'm thinking about that, what I assume is the same Airbnb, and I know the neighbors to the Airbnb, and they do have parties, and they have gone over the limit, and they have added limits on the number of people who can stay at that particular Airbnb, and there seemed to be a lot of rule breaking, and people are ready to leave the neighborhood because of that Airbnb. But what is the documentation needed to prove that this particular one, let's say they truly are as egregious as some of the neighbors want them to make it sound like they are? What is that threshold to prove it that you need to check multiple times without having a police force in our community? That's,
Yeah.
because it becomes a little bit of hearsay if it's a neighbor versus a neighbor, kind of thing, versus bringing in somebody who can enforce and say, yeah, I went here and I knocked on the door and there were 15 cars and there was a party going on inside and, blah, 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 versus, yeah, there were 15 cars, but they were all off on a hike somewhere else. They'd taken a bus and this is just where they parked their car and really wasn't a big deal, right? Like that, I think that's a lot to figure out. That's my point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we should at first, but I want to suggest that we think about what that looks like for the occasional bad actor and enforcement mechanism down the line. Like if you're going to have a registration system, there ought to be a process for removing someone's permission to do this.
I think we're not gonna stop people from having parties at an rented Airbnb. And I don't think, nor do I think we should. I think it should be discouraged. I think they're good neighbors. I tend to think of, we start with a registration and fees, get an idea where we are. My personal preference and what I've seen so far is this could be covered by a zoning permit.
Yeah.
And the zoning permit is issued upon compliance attestation from the fire marshal that it meets code. And then a zoning permit is good for whatever, for years. And that any sort of violations could lead to a revocation of that zoning permit until the fire safety code, whatever measures are remedied. That I think that so then, it would increase the revenue through the zoning office, that's fine, but it would be incumbent, it'd be nice to say we're gonna take this money and hire some sort of enforcement officer or contract the constable to go out and take care of this stuff, but I think it could be handled in-house initially through the zoning process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if there's only 300 in Waitsfield and we're charging $200, like one, that's $6,000. You're not going to hire anyone new for $6,000.
And I'm not trying to get a bump in my salary either. I'm just saying, I think
But you deserve one.
I appreciate it.
No,
I think that's one way to keep it all in-house
Yeah.
and, you require a zoning permit.
are all zoning permit violations assessed at the same fine rate?
That's set by statute, so it's
Yeah.
right now it's up to $200 a day, but
Okay.
I think we want to create a different penalty and enforcement system for
That's-
these permits,
that's
that's
what-
separate. It's obviously what would mesh with statute or.
Yeah, but I think that's doable.
Mhm.
But I think that's right, because I think that gives. Well, we'll step back for a second. My other question is like. We end up being the ultimate enforcement. Well, by we, I mean the town ends up being the ultimate enforcement arm here, because I mean, Airbnb, Verbo, whoever is not gonna care. Like, they're not gonna have to test that they have whatever, I mean, I'm sure there's some box somewhere they collect that says they have whatever permits they need, but they will get listed if the person that owns it lists it. So monitoring and enforcing
Yep.
becomes an issue. I don't know, and it's a conversation we can have with Warren, because they are finally moving forward, I think. I know they're spending a lot of money on a third-party software solution to create their listing. I don't know if part of why that's useful is because it also like searches all of the, known short-term rental listing sites and collates against permits and
Mhm.
determines who's violating.
Mhm,
Mm,
But if that is in fact what they do, that seems like a useful thing.
mhm,
Because I'm not sure how much of your time
mhm.
we want to allocate to enforcement,
Sure.
you know, running the grand list through
Mhm.
every.
Mhm.
It'll come up and sort of rectify itself when these units are bought and sold, because if it's a permit that's required, we know what the buyer's intended use is, and if they say, oh, I'm gonna short-term rent it, we'll know to look for a permit on file, and if it's not there, then it will hold things up. Or if there's a violation, you know, recorded, that would hold up a title process potentially, and could be a way that things would get fixed or at least noted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good
yeah, so I
point.
suppose it comes down to sort of how active the town wants to be in enforcing. I suspect that a pure honor system rule is not gonna be very well adhered to,
Yeah.
but,
And we shouldn't use the definition of long-term rental that the state uses for the transfer tax, because there's a giant loophole to get around it.
good to know. Yeah, I suspect that whatever specific language we put in for defining what a short-term rental is gonna take a little while to
Mhm.
come up with.
Mhm.
I'm sure there's good examples in all of the precedent, but yeah, I think that's right, like, not relying on state definitions is probably the right call.
Well, because there's short-term rentals and there are seasonal rentals.
Yeah,
And so those are totally two different things. I mean, renting one's home for 3 or 4 months versus
yeah,
a weekend.
yeah, and I guess that's a question is, do we feel that, you know, there's a cutoff on what STRs should
yeah.
capture here?
That's a good point, and I'm surprised that didn't actually come up in my chat GPT research, because I was asking about winter centric units that would also clearly have seasonal rentals. I do think that's different. Off the cuff, I would say 30 days or less we
I
would
would
call
agree.
short term. I think that's fair.
I would agree.
And yeah, I think seasonal renters are a totally different ballgame. They care about the space because they're living in it for a long period of time. So I think that
Exactly.
it's a different population,
Mhm.
or not different population, but like totally different circumstances. And we might also want to have them register again for fire code stuff, but they're not be
Yeah, I
included in any
mean-
sort of cap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that makes sense.
I don't believe that any of our current zoning bylaws include any uh permitted or conditional use related to rental.
No.
At least not for residential rental. So I am curious, sort of. I actually don't know if they can. I don't know if that's.
I've not seen it in at least, non-big city bylaws, yeah.
Yeah,
Not quite sure what they do in big cities, but I've
Yeah.
not seen anything like that in a more local
yeah.
level.
That's why I'm just wondering from a zoning, if we're gonna try to use the zoning process as a, like, are we actually able to create a conditional use that we could actually enforce
I see.
for that purpose?
Mhm.
I would think
Well,
so,
would-
but
I hope so.
What would trigger conditional use review for an SDR?
well, if we just made it a conditional use and
Oh, all SDRs going through the DRB. That might get a lot of pushback.
yeah,
Yeah,
Cause then what you're doing is, especially for, I mean, we're gonna ask, existing Airbnb owners to register.
yeah,
And then I think that's sending notice to abutters who already probably know, like say Alice, that this guy's got this Airbnb. That's gonna get them all out in droves, and I think that's
Yeah.
gonna create a circus.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a little bit unfair to the
yeah.
owner. My perspective.
And I don't think that's really necessary for anything we've discussed so far.
No, I was just curious.
I thought about that too.
Yeah.
Like, what would trigger, maybe there are instances that we haven't thought about that would trigger. Maybe it's a neighborhood, maybe it's an STR in, a certain, I don't know,
Well, what about
a
the
certain
new-
district.
The new neighborhood that's being constructed right now in Mad River Park.
That's East Landing, the homes
Yeah,
back.
I mean, would that be a situation to have a overlay district to limit the amount of STRs there?
I have to think about that.
I mean, because I.
There's at least one listed on Verbo right now.
Right? Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Not surprised.
Each of those duplexes going,
Oh, those duplexes are looking like great verbos to me. One of them, you're going to get your headlights going right at you. So it's not likely to be a long-term rental. The first one you're going to get to, that's going to be a verbo. That's my thought as I drive down Route 100.
yeah, no, I was talking about Kingsbury's the 16 duplex that will be going in before the soccer fields off Airport Road. I mean, those are, you know, they just got finalized all their state permitting, so I think they'll be breaking ground at some point in the spring. But yeah, I think that is a point that would
I
a
mean,
bit
because
deeper dive.
in our public hearings with the master plan, that's a huge fear of, oh, yeah, you're gonna put in all this housing. And it's going to be usurped by short-term rentals.
Well, not if, I mean, I think that's another question is, you know, especially if there's, you know, if the town were to work with developers in developing that vision, then the town could indeed include short-term rental restrictions.
Restrictions.
It's, you know, separate from whatever we do here.
Well, I mean, but what I'm saying is that maybe that's part of our task here
Mhm.
is.
Yeah.
Coming up with short-term rental restrictions
Mhm.
for any
Mhm.
new development that comes up.
Mhm.
So when I went out west skiing this year, I was in Idaho, but near Jackson on the other side of the mountains. The town we were in, every single condo, and there were a lot of them, were short-term rentals as far as I can make out. Or at least as you're going in, you're just following a sea of people coming up and they're all turning in. So there's a high rate. So I think it is a real fear of new businesses coming in that would just buy up a legitimate one if we're looking at trying to get residents housing, you know, right? So if that might
That's
be
where
something.
a cap comes into place.
Mhm.
It's so easy and smart. You've got all your cleaning. You're going to go from one unit to another. I mean, it makes a really great business model, and so something to really pay attention to. And that's what probably happens up at Sugarbush. A lot of those condos.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess going back to conditional use, I mean, if we did create something like a STR permitted overlay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's if somebody was proposing an STR that was not in that overlay, then it would be required to go through conditional use review, what those standards
Yeah.
would look like. I'm not sure,
Yeah,
so that had occurred to me as well.
yeah, I mean, I think it's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
That's, you know, a bigger question. I know that in some
But if we
cases,
do the 10%, then 10%'s 10%. So there's something also really nice about what Emma said before, right? So then you're not worrying about whether or not it or whatever the magic number is. You're not telling people they can't buy something and turn it into a short-term rental because they're here or there. You're saying you can't, in general, whether you're in this and if you would like to get on there, then there's a list and we'll put you on the list. And maybe there's part of the town that does have a 5% number or 15% or some other number just because we decide that that area could be higher or lower. But I think it makes the most sense to be simple, right? Instead of, if we do these overlay district after overlay district by neighborhood, it's going to just it's complicated and wonky.
Sorry, that gesture I just made was my husband and I talking to each other about a skunk smell in the background and nothing to do with what you were saying, Becca. And I forgot just to clear that up.
we know how many. I mean, like I know we have the grand list. Do we know just offhand how many houses we have in Waitsfield?
Pure housing stock?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the town plan.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure. I mean, but that was as of 2020.
yeah,
And that's again, and I try to get that number from when we were updating the town plan from Mary Jane, but even that's not so cut and dry. Because
Yeah.
the way that they separate out mobile homes versus condos.
Right.
But I think there is a ballpark number in our town plan.
Okay.
I wanna say
Just-
it's. I don't want to mistake.
I'm just curious sort of what 10% actually looks like from a numbers
Well,
perspective.
We have, what, how many residents in Waitsfield?
1866 as of the last census.
Yeah, so we're looking at maybe 1,500 houses.
That's what I'm thinking is somewhere in that.
And so what's 10% of 1,500? That's 150.
Yeah.
We said there are about 300
We have
STRs
way
or
more than 150. Exactly. That would put a hold on everything right now.
Okay, so maybe the number's 20%. You know, the 10% did just come out of thin air. But
Yeah.
you know, I think that's how we start with, you know, everyone's in. You're grandfathered in. Maybe
Well,
we
and I
set
think
an
that-
initial cap of 10%, and then we can reevaluate. We can raise that, and also like we can even dial it in at that point of saying like, actually, the village feels like the perfect place for short-term rentals. The cap there will be 20%, and the cap everywhere else is 10, or whatever. Pick your zone, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think everyone's in. We set an initial cap of somewhere in the 10 to 20% range, and then we can tailor it from there.
I think we'll lose a few requiring fire safety.
I agree. I
Oh,
think that's
yeah,
going to be
absolutely.
very self-selecting.
I think we will too. And I think we're also going to lose some requiring a local point of contact.
Yeah.
Really? Why
Yeah.
would it be a barrier?
Yeah, because there are going to be
People-
people who come up and clean themselves but don't live here, and they're just going to be some who really don't do it. You know, they're not the business people. They're kind of just doing extra money to pay the taxes, but not really fully. 1 weekend a year, 2 weekends a year, they rent it out. I'm not bothering.
They don't want to fill out a zoning permit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to want to bother, right? But I think you're going to lose a few for that, but 300 on roughly, based on this, at least we're going to say on Airbnb right now or Vrbo, those are all serious. They don't actually include that group that I just talked about. I mean, there is some of that because some of these are also a little word of mouthy, or you know, I put it up and take it down or whatever.
Yeah, that's another question too, is I'm assuming that our plan, it would be to define STRs based on use and not listing.
Mhm.
Meaning that the definition of an STR would be, you know, rental for a certain period, you know,
30 days or less
30 days or less, and, you know,
in each time,
yeah,
because it could be all year long.
yeah. So by which I mean, like, technically that would capture people who are renting without ever going on Airbnb, Vrbo, whatever. I don't know how we'd ever enforce that, other than,
We might not be able to
Yeah.
enforce it all. But we can at least make sure the wording is such that we're not suggesting that you could come up with create a new platform for the Madura Valley that didn't fit our, you know, right?
oh, I mean, but conversely, there's very likely to be more pushback from the community on a rule that prohibits the word of mouth unlisted Airbnb than listing on Airbnb, just for historical cultural reasons. You know, the short-term rental phenomenon existed in Vermont decades before Airbnb existed.
Mhm,
You know,
exactly.
people have been paying their tax bills by renting ski houses or year-round houses to skiers since skiing started in the 40s in Vermont. So like there is a long-standing cultural tradition of short-term rental that does not depend on Airbnb. And I think the reality is those should still be under this type of regulation. But I think there will be more reluctance to you know, embrace that than there is to, you know, agreeing that Airbnb or Vrbo, the newer technology driven rentals, I think are less culturally ingrained. So that's my 2 cents.
I would just add here, table 4.2 of the 2022 town plan. Based on the 2019 census, it's a graph here, but it looks like as of 2019, there were approximately maybe 1,030 homes, housing units, and in Waitsfield, and approximately 800 households.
Okay,
So that was based on the 2019 census.
and that's total housing units, not year round.
Total housing unit,
Okay.
just, yep.
Okay.
Not very many.
Yeah, it's not a huge number.
And of course, we've seen the uptick during COVID of building around here too. So I would imagine we're probably closer to 1,100 housing units.
So if we have only 1,000 houses and 300 of them are short-term rentals.
That's 30%.
If that's the case, we don't have hard numbers on how much of that is Waitsfield, but if that's the case, then yeah.
But it could be mostly phased into, because back to our point of discussion earlier about the fact that up at Mount Ellen, there are a lot of condos, and the Battleground has a lot of short-term rentals and, whatnot. So we should look into that data a little bit more.
I think
And
there's
find out.
definitely a data
Yeah.
collection needed here. Which is fine, because that's, part of this process is figuring that out, so.
Mhm.
I do think, yeah, getting decent numbers on how many actual STRs there are in town would be really helpful.
Can the
I
state
definitely-
give us this information because they do collect taxes?
That I don't know.
I think if the state had it, people would have it by now. Got to be something. Maybe they
It may
don't,
not be.
maybe they too, they do it by zip code as opposed to town,
Could be,
I
but
guess, because
could
I
also
think
just be that
if they had that information, we'd have it, we'd know exactly.
departments of revenue are historically very reticent to give
Yeah,
away
yeah.
information about taxpayers because they don't want people avoiding paying taxes, so they tend to be very protective. So I'd be surprised if that data was public.
Okay.
We can ask, certainly. I just would be a little surprised because, yeah, the more you tell taxpayers that you're going to use their data for anything other than collecting tax, the less. So generally speaking, there's pretty strict confidentiality there. We can ask.
Well, I think we'd ask by zip code. I do understand that from other data collections I've done where it gets really hairy. When you try to get street level and other information, even when you're
Yeah,
looking out for people. But they might be willing to do that.
yeah, we should definitely look into it. I mean, any source of data we can get would be great.
Because the problem is that in addition to Airbnb and Vrbo, I mean, there's my Facebook page keeps telling me there's some Vermont short-term rental site. I've never gone on it, so
Vacasa.
even what, yeah.
Vacasa.
Yes, that one, I think so. Yep. So like, there's other sites and other things popping up all the time, and then the other problem is that the number on Vrbo isn't going to be the same as the number on Airbnb, even if you just look at those two, because some people use both, some people use one, not the other. They charge fees, blah blah blah.
I think Vacasa is more of a rental management company where if you own a unit, you can sort of turn over the management of it to Vacasa, and they essentially book your rentals, do the cleaning, take a huge cut. But they're sort of a turnkey, call it property manager.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think Vacasa is a platform like Airbnb.
Okay.
I think we should look
Yeah,
into.
they
like,
list
yeah,
on
the-
Airbnb. It'll say
Yeah.
like the host is Vacasa.
Yeah, I have to imagine, I mean, like, I'm sure there are people you can pay a lot of money to scrape all this data and collate it for you, and there may be sort of more commodity services that do that too. Worth seeing if Warren or Basin or Moortown has done that, looked into that. figured out what sources of data are worthwhile, what aren't. I'm more than happy to have those conversations. I've got.
I think it also goes back to Emma's first point that, the first year of something could be more of a data collection year, doing
Yeah.
something simple of, hey, are you short-term renting? This is what we require, as just kind of just to see who's out there, and then go from there.
And the
Yeah.
health and safety, the safety thing, putting that in there is lovely because it's kind of a reason for it. We want to know, we want contacts so that we can help you out with your property if something goes wrong. Right? There's an angle there for participating that's more than just we're asking for this. You're getting something out of it too if you don't live around here.
Yeah, and I think that's the most sort of unassailable portion of it, right? From a public relations angle.
Mhm.
Not that we won't get pushback, but
But we
it's a
need
lot.
those. What are the hooks? It's kind of my.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's pretty clear that I don't mean to take a vote or anything, but I think it's pretty clear that everyone is generally supportive of the idea of some kind of fire code certification permit process by which we get the information about what's out there and give the town a hook into this problem and problem in quotes this issue. In order to get the data that we need to move forward. I think it would be worth, even before proposing that to the select board, I think it's worth trying to get a little bit of a handle on the data that we can. Because if it turns out that actually there's 5% of properties are Airbnbs or whatever in Waitsfield, that's a different problem than if it's 50%. And so having that data at all would be useful. And I also don't want I think it would also be good to be prepared, because I don't want the select board to be ambushed by good data from lobbying groups that I'm sure they do in fact have, that says that actually they know that it's not 50% in Waitsfield. In fact, it's much smaller. Or otherwise, just sort of being underprepared, I think at the select board level is going to lead to greater problems than being overprepared. So yeah, I think it's worth doing some of this research to.
So, but if we're recommending registration, are we recommending the $27,000 computer?
I think it's more than that.
Yeah.
I think it's on the order of $100,000 a year, or for whatever they.
There's a
buy
one-time
in.
setup fee, and then
Yeah.
it's an operation.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
so
the
they're
actual
Depending on
buy-in.
levels.
So the 27,000 in the Valley Reporter was just their annual.
Well, I
I think that's an annualized,
it could be. It's been a while since I had met with Granicus, but I'm
Yeah,
sure it's gone up.
I heard the numbers a while back.
$1,000.
I'm not sure. I think
I could be
that
wrong.
might depend on whether they're operating and issuing the permits themselves. So I think
Yeah.
there's different
I
levels.
think there's tiers of service. I just from what I recall from a discussion with Dan Dan Raddick years ago. But that might have been including their setup fee and a 3-year term or something. I don't know what it was all inclusive of, but
Probably enforcement too.
yeah, probably a lot of stuff. But it's expensive
Mhm.
is the main takeaway. And it would be helpful to know what the revenue from a permit system is going to be before committing to a cost
Sure.
like that.
And that's why we've always said, let's wait to see what goes through with Warren.
That is, yeah, unfortunately, I think that the community has gotten impatient enough that that's not
That's not.
no longer
No
viable.
longer.
It would be good to know if that Warren's system if their license could be shared valley-wide as
I
a
was thinking that,
shared
yeah,
resource.
I wonder if once they're in, if adding new zip codes to their, coverage area is less expensive than a new contract.
Mhm.
And so maybe there's some work through the planning district that could be done for an intertown pact on that.
That would be great to save some money.
Yeah. And then
It would save them money
sounds
too.
you could pay by the percentage of listings that are in your town. So
Yeah.
Warren would still pay the most because it has a gazillion condos,
Oh, right, yeah.
But then maybe we could get into that software for less and still offset some of their costs for them.
Right.
They
exactly.
decided on $200 a unit. I mean, it's not minor amount, and I'm just assuming right now that that's a number we would land on because it was made with good sense. I would want to look into it before you
Yeah.
ask that much of people who are, because I would think it's for everybody. Again, back to the locals who just rent out for Christmas week. You know, are we asking them to pay $200? That's a night of, you know, or part of a night, most of a night.
Those are the folks that I think if we require fire safety compliance are gonna struggle the most with it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Cause once a fire marshal identifies an issue, it gets fixed. You can't have a fire marshal visit your home and have him identify an issue, not fix it, and still think you're gonna be able to rent out your property.
Mhm.
Stan will find you.
And he follows up. He's very, very thorough.
put you on his list, you won't get away from it. That's definitely true. All right, well, I think it's, you know, we got a lot of follow-up items on that. I think that's good. So I think if we can get a little bit more info on just straight numbers of what's currently out there, however good that data is, but you know, if people can just sort of, I'm happy to root around a little bit.
Yeah, I too, maybe we'll we can get an idea of that for the next meeting and
Yeah.
continue the discussion. I think Josh has some data.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm sure he
and
does.
I can follow up with the Warren folks on Thursday at our editor meeting.
Great.
One more data there, and maybe even find out whether there's a possibility of sort of piggybacking on Warren's work. Okay. Anything else that people wanted to talk about on that topic today? Anything that we didn't cover? Still very much in the sort of information gathering and initial.
In my notes of our conversation, us meeting about it is, I think it was Becca that said, what is the impact on our inns?
Yeah,
If we could, do some kind of talking, I mean, we don't have that many inns, maybe, one of us can volunteer to call it.
I'm not sure how would they quantify the impact.
Yeah. How would they even know?
I think that's a bigger question that floats around with all of this is
What is it? Would they have any idea?
Well, maybe it's asking them for trends, right? The anecdotal. How have things changed over the last 10 years? And how is getting staff? Because I know from the people who own the yellow farmhouse that when they first bought the place, they were told that providing housing for staff was critical if they wanted to have staff. Right. And so that plays back into our circle. And it's part of where that thought kind of was generated from is, okay, that was true for this one, but that's what they were told, or that's what they were told when they went into this business. What are the others kind of feeling or saying or thinking? And has that changed? Does anybody have that history? But I mean, it'd be great to have hard numbers because numbers say a lot more, you know, than anecdotal, but yeah, you can't, we already know it, right? But that's something that we can really point to. I mean, short-term rentals we know have changed the valley.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, right. In ways we don't necessarily know about or are quieter. Nobody who has a home with children is getting anybody coming in to help them clean because nobody is going to clean a house with children at an affordable price when they can go into a nice short-term rental, right? I mean, reality. But that one's easy to point out. What are the other ones? I don't know.
Yeah, I think. There's certainly like a limit on what we can easily find out, but I think those conversations are important to try to drill into it a little bit more. And then, yeah. And also just, I think, circling back with the select board on what would be helpful to them. So. You know, I think that's also a conversation that we should try to have. And maybe targeting certain members of the select board who are the most curious would be useful.
Like Brian Choop.
Brian and Fred, I think, would be the two.
Yeah.
I'd talk to first.
Mhm.
You know, I think they just have the most broad concerns about what this would mean.
Mhm.
So I think that'd be good conversations to have. And yeah, just to figure out like what kind of data would be helpful for them and figuring out where they stand on it and what they would support. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. That's super helpful. I want to make sure that we don't spend all night here, so got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah.
So let's move on to other business, if there is any. I actually don't have anything to report at the moment. We have a planning district meeting at the end of the week. I'm sure I'll have more to say coming out of that, but at the moment, I don't know if anyone else has anything they wanted to flag. All right, in that case, we can get out a little bit early. Should be nice. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Anne Marie. We got a second. Thanks, Emma. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Again, unanimity. I like it. All right, well, thanks very much. Our next meeting is the first Tuesday of October,
That's correct.
which should be
October 6th.
the 7th.
Okay.
Wow, that's like real far. It's as far as it can be. All right, so October 7th, we'll meet again.
Okay.
And between now and then, if folks have a chance to look at you know, additional data on short-term rental stuff, please feel free to send it, you know, to me or JB. Just don't email everyone because we don't want to make it public record.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, noted.
I mean, not that it's a problem if it's public record, it's just annoying to have your personal emails or whatever.
Yeah.
Subject to public. We don't want that.
Exactly.
Preference is to send it directly to me and or JB.
Okay.
All right. Thanks very much. Have a good night.
Great. Thanks.
Good.